You know, growing up, one of the great things about growing up a coach's son is you get to meet guys like this. And this guy not only was a great football player for Denison University, but he's gone on to great heights as a football coach at the collegiate level under Woody, right on up through Dick Vermeil and right on up to Don Shula, where he retired as the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. And this is one hell of a guy. This is one hell of a Big Red teammate. And thank you for being here, George, and we look forward to your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you for all. The Piper family have grown up, I'll tell you that, since I knew them. 61 years ago, I was working at a butcher shop in Bay Village, Ohio, when I was a senior in high school. That's the first time I met Keith Piper. He came in to recruit me. And he said, "Would you like to go to Denison?" I said, "Where?" He said, "Oh, it's a beautiful school down." He said, "I don't know anything. My brothers all went to Ohio University. I figured I'm going to go to Ohio." Well, Keith Piper recruited me, and I came to Denison in 1952. And that was during the Korean War, and I was in the Navy Reserves, and I got called to active duty in 1953 and 54, so I missed that omnibus deal. I was in the Navy at that time. But that was a great thing in the Navy at that time, because that's where I met my wife, Cloyd. And she was a Navy nurse, and I was a Navy corpsman. We weren't supposed to fraternize, but somehow we managed to work it out. And I came back to Denison in 1955 and went to played with Keith, and Cloyd was still in the Navy, and we got married in 1956, and we lived up here in the Enchanted Cottages. You guys, some of you remember the Enchanted Cottages, veterans housing. I know Marvin does, because he was one of my neighbors, and I just it was something else to live up there. It was great. It was the greatest thing that ever happened. You know, you paid $35 a month for 9 months because school wasn't in session in the summertime, and that covered all your utilities except your telephone. That cost $1.24 a month. So, Keith Piper, I want to just say one other thing. I got something. My mind's so full of Keith Piper right now, but I do want to mention something that coaches' wives. Coaches' wives are a very special breed of people. They do without their husbands a great deal of the year, and you're gone, you're playing, but I'll tell you one thing: nobody could be more supportive than the coaches' wives that were here when I coached at Denison. And Mike Piper, took my young bride under her wing and kind of got her going. And the coaches' wives traveled to all the games. They get in one of the station wagons, and they go to all the games, and it was great. But it's a special thing that, and God knows my wife. We moved all over the daggone country in my career, and somebody said I retired from the Dolphins. Actually, I got fired, and I was 67 years old. I thought it was time to give it up, so we retired. But anyways, let me tell you a couple things about Keith Piper, the great fisherman. See, that's what he did. He fished Ebaw's Pond till there weren't any fish left in it. We were fishing over there one day, and we both had our spinning reels and so forth, and we're casting off, and we're spinning in there, and they were having a great time, but we're not catching a darn thing. And there are two little boys over there that got a bamboo rod with a casting reel taped onto the thing, and they pull out a big bass out of that thing. So Keith runs over there and said, "What'd you have on?" He said, "Oh, I had a thing called a Rapala." "Oh," he says, "I don't go for that artificial bait stuff." He said, well, so anyways, Keith loved to fish, but you never beat Keith in fishing. If I caught a bass that long and he caught a chub that long, he won. How about the arrowheads, Pipers? Huh? Keith would run the fields over here and collect arrowheads. he had the greatest arrowhead collection that you ever saw in your life. These nice little arrowheads and big arrowheads and axes and so forth. And he'd just roam when the farmers would plow up their fields, he'd go and look for arrowheads. And then we put the single wing in. We didn't have a quarterback, but we had a great running back with Tony Hall, and Nicky Mazurka was our fullback, and Bob Henninger our blocking back. And you know, I saw Bob Canuti today, and I said, you know, one thing that stuck out in my mind, one thing that people don't realize about the single wing is that your defense is always pretty darn good when you're playing against the single wing in practice every day. And we had two all-conference defensive end, Bob Canuti and George Schutte. And Bob told me one day, I said, boy, you guys play so well out there, you're doing well. He said, Coach, this is easy. He said, when we practice against the single wing, we get double teamed every play. We got the blocking back and the fullback blocking us. One's blocking us inside, one's blocking out. We got the strong guard coming the blocking back, and the fullback and the blocking back and the strong guard. He said, we play these T teams, they send one back at me. He says, it's easy. And those kids made all, I say kids, you know, they're not kids anymore, but they are to me, that they made our defenses were, those years that we had the single wing were pretty good. In fact, they were very good. I think one year, I want to say 63, we didn't give up a point on Deeds Field. Is that right? Yeah, we didn't give up a point. We had a couple goal line stands against Heidelberg, but we didn't give up a point on Deeds Field that year. But you know, the single wing is it's an interesting thing. We played it pretty well, and we played two types. The first 2 years we were in the single wing. We played the balance line Tennessee General Neyland single wing, and we went down to Knoxville and spent a week there learning with the Tennessee coaching staff, and they were still running single wing back at that time. But you know, when I went to work for the Philadelphia Eagles, we played the Dallas Cowboys every year, and they were running a thing called the shotgun. It's a single wing. You know, it's the same deal. And you look at the football today in college football, they're all running the pistol formation and the options with the thing. It's basically out of the single wing offense that Keith Piper put in 1962. But I'll tell you how innovative Keith Piper was. When I came to work on the staff, we had run the Inside Belly series when I was in school, when Marvin scored all those many touchdowns that he scored. And he said, you know, I said, boy, that's a great offense, Coach. We led the nation in scoring that year for a division, well, it wasn't division, it was small college back at that time. And he said, yeah, he said, but I'll tell you how innovative it was. And he goes back in his closet and he pulls out a book. And the publishing book on that's 1909, Pop Warner. And he had this book, and he told about how you ride the first back in and you give to the second back. He says, that's how innovative we are with that ride series. He said that was, Pop Warner ran that in 1909 at Cornell. But, you know, it's just great. I don't think people sometimes realized what a great football coach Keith Piper was. Not just in his knowledge of football, but how he handled people, how he handled young men, how these young men, now I look at these young men that are here that all played for this man, and you look, and I said to the doctor, I said, you know, I'm just, how gratifying it is to see how well these young men have done. They went to Denison, they got a great education, they played football, they learned about, one of the great things about football to me is learning to be a great teammate. I have two brothers that are music teachers, and you know, we talk all the time about how putting together, you know, everybody's got to do the same thing. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And for a band or an orchestra or a choir to sing, and everybody's got to do the right thing at the right time. And that's what football is all about. Football is a team game of 11 people doing the right thing at the right time, and you learn to support your teammate and to be your teammate's the most important. And I think this carries on into life. Because you know something? I had the greatest teammate in the world when I got married. She supported my career more than anybody in the world. And she didn't got involved with it, just like Mike Piper did. And you know, I think about that story Keith talked about. Cloyd and I always felt that's my wife, Cloyd, always felt like God had brought us together, because there's no reason that we should have been. We met in the Navy. She was an officer. She was a Lieutenant JG, and I was a first-class seaman. You weren't supposed to fraternize. You know how that was. And I asked her out for about 8 or 9 times, but she'd never go out with me. I figured, well, she just didn't want to fraternize with a peon like me. Well, one of the nurses came to me one day and she said, "Are you ever going to ask Miss Ray out again?" I said, "Oh, probably not. She keeps turning me down." She said, "But you better rethink about that." I went back to the barracks and I sat down in my bunk and I said, "You know, those gals must have been talking." And so I went a couple days later and I said, "Miss Ray, would you like to go to a movie?" She said, "Yes, I would." Ooh. Then I got out of the Navy in about 6 weeks, and she had another year to go. But I just think about how God brings people together. I read a book while Cloyd was so sick here the last year called Divine Alignment, and how God brings people together. And I thought about that, and I said, you know what? How did a big, ugly football coach from Niles, Ohio, meet this beautiful young Spanish woman from Tucumcari, New Mexico, in Denver, when Keith Piper and Philomena Michael Ciedabaca met in Denver, fell in love, and look what happened. Look what happened. And you don't think God is great? God is the greatest thing in the world. I am so proud that I had a Denison education. Great school. It's a great, great school. And I think, you know, to Denison, my Denison, you know, it was a great school, and I loved my years here. See, I lived in Granville for 4 years as a student and 5 years as a coach. I lived here for 9 years and worked in Sergeant's Market when I was in school. And it was, that's gone now. It's a tavern or something now. It's hard to believe. But Keith Piper was an innovative football coach. More plays, we'd go to conventions and go to clinics, and he had a drawer full of napkins that we'd be drawing plays on. He'd say, "Yeah, I know where that is." And he'd put it down and pull out a napkin that had the certain play on it that he'd seen from one of the coaches that spoke at the clinic. And I think that's why he was so successful for so many years. He never let any grass grow under his feet. He always was looking ahead, always trying to be a little bit better, a little bit more. But he always had the players upmost in his mind, and he knew that they were here for an education. Even though he did say at one time to me, he says, "You know, Denison would be the greatest place in the world if there weren't any students here." But I got to tell one more story, and then I'll leave you. I think it was my first year here, and Cloyd and I had bought a little house on Sampson Place, 19 Sampson Place. And Keith and the Piper family lived at 7 Sampson Place, which was up above that. And I get a telephone call at 2 o'clock in the morning. I answer the phone. I said, "Who the heck's calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning?" "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm in bed sleeping. What do you think I'm doing?" He said, "Can you come up and babysit for us?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I got to take Mike to the hospital." He says, "And bring a coat and a blanket." He says, "Because our house is cold." So I get my jacket and my blanket, and I run up the hill up to 7 Sampson Place, and the kids are all in bed, sleeping under a lot of clothes. I guess the university had come to fix their furnace that day and took the fan out, so there was no heat. And it was cold. It was around 0. And so I slept on the couch until Keith come back, and Mike had, I think that's when Billy was born. And I said, you know, it's just Keith Piper. And he said, "Don't worry about the kids. They'll get up. Karen's going to take care of them. She'll know how to get them off to school." I think Karen was about the 7th or 8th grade at that time, weren't you, Karen? And But you know, the happiest time I had in my whole coaching career was here at Denison. I had more fun, and I enjoyed coaching about as much as anything I've ever done because our staff was compatible. Keith and Bobby and Dick Scott and I, we did all kinds of things together, and our wives did. And it was the most fun I ever had in coaching. And not that I didn't have a lot of fun other places. You know, you keep going where I was able to go in my career. But I just feel like the foundation of my coaching career started right here with Keith Piper and Denison University and Mike Piper, Philomena Piper, and the wonderful coaching staff. And out of that original staff that started the single wing in 1962, I hate to tell you, but I'm the only one left. They've all gone to be with the Lord. God bless you all. Great to see everybody, and we're just so proud of Denison.